If this chapter of your life had a title, what would it be?
Chaos. I'm financially nowhere near as secure as I was when I was 25, but I am so much happier now.
How did you finance those early days?
Phoebe Cleary Rudd is the co-founder and commercial director of The Sauce, a London-based digital magazine covering the hospitality industry. Since its launch in May 2022, the magazine has grown to 600,000 monthly readers, and they have launched influencer marketing platform Club Sauce, valued at £2.7 million.
So your magazine shares some of the best restaurants, bars. So I'm gonna ask you your favorite brands. I'm not sure I would take it first dates to Soho.
I take all my first dates to Soho.
Okay, interesting. So you were included in this year's Forbes 30 Under 30. Was this important to you? You've had a lot of intellectual validation, right?
Yes.
Why was a beauty contest important to you?
I knew the thing that would make that CV stick out at the top of the pile to whichever men were reading it was I used the fact that my childhood was difficult to push me forwards. Now I just have to win. I have to succeed.
We've covered your relationship with winning. What is your relationship with failure?
Oh.
Why does the public opinion matter to you? Phoebe.
Yes.
How would you describe yourself and what you do?
I am incredibly ambitious. I have the world's biggest chip on my shoulder, which means I've got to win at absolutely everything I do. And it makes me very competitive. But off the back of that, I've been able to build a business that I'm incredibly proud of, doing something that I love. And I genuinely wake up every day enjoying the job that I have.
What is it that you do?
So I own The Source. And The Source is a magazine that's focused on the hospitality industry. It was started in the wake of COVID to support hospitality. As you know, all of those restaurants had just been through the worst 2-3 years ever. Lots of them didn't survive. Yeah. Those that did were really struggling. And The Source was just created to be a space that celebrated the people behind the scenes, whether it's the founders or the chefs or the kitchen porters. It was just designed to shine a spotlight on this industry and hopefully get people engaging with it again and spending money there and helping it grow. And then The Source grew massively. So we're about 3 years and 3 weeks old now. And it grew massively, and we've expanded slightly since then. And we've just launched Club Sauce, which is an influencer marketing platform designed to make influencer marketing easier for hospitality.
Beautiful. I love how you described yourself, because I usually ask this question in the very beginning, so you get to introduce yourself to our audience. But usually the way people introduce themselves, at least in this show, is through a professional lens. So my name is Alberto, and I am the co-founder of this, and that.
Yeah.
And then I usually have to ask, but how would you describe yourself if we were at a bar?
Yeah.
Are you ambitious? Are you a bubbly person? Are you positive? And that's how you started with, which is quite interesting. And then I had to ask you, what is it that you do? Which is refreshing. So thank you for that and for the honesty. You have a strong academic track record. So straight A's in high school, a degree from one of the most competitive schools in the world, London School of Economics. Usually, people with such strong educational background, they follow a corporate career that ends up being equally strong.
Yeah.
But you became an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Okay. Why?
So I did try the corporate career, but my career journey has been very rocky. So I started out as a war reporter, and I was in Kiev in Ukraine for Euromaidan post the annexation of Crimea back in 2014. And I was like, I really thrive in not dangerous environments, but I liked the thrill of doing that. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do full time. This is going to be my job. I'm going to be a war reporter. And so I go to the London School of Economics.
What did your parents think of that, by the way?
That's a whole different story. But I go to the London School of Economics thinking, and I studied politics, thinking I'll graduate and use this degree to go back into war reporting. But I did what all LSE grads do, and I sold my soul, and I went into the city, and I went into finance. It's now Rathbones, Saunderson House. But I was just awful. I was never let me manage your money because...
Why do you think most LSE graduates, generally most business school graduates, they end up in finance?
Yeah. I think LSE, I didn't like my time there. I think it's very much a branded self-study degree. You go to LSE for the name. If you go to Oxford or Cambridge, you're going because, you know, the value of the teaching is huge. And you're actually learning a lot there. LSE, you get sort of 4 hours of contact a week. It's just, you're just paying for the name. And because you're not really engaging with your course, I think you just get sucked into this mentality where, okay, I'm here to make money at the end of the day. That's all I care about. And that's what I did. And like everyone else around me was sort of getting jobs at JP Morgan's and wherever else. And I was just like, okay, fine, I suppose this is going to be what I do. So I went into the city, but I was famously awful. I was so bad because it's such a regulated industry, because it needs to be a regulated industry, right? But I am, you probably realise this by now, very chaotic and all over the place, and it just didn't work for me. So, and it was either a case of I leave or eventually they're going to ask me to leave, right? And so I left. And there was this woman at the time who had this tiny, tiny little blog. And she wanted someone to come on board and essentially monetize this blog. And I said no, because obviously I said no. I was making quite a lot of money and I just said no. And I said no 4 times. And it wasn't until the 5th time she asked that I said, fine, I'm going to do a total career 180 and go into digital media. And it was a huge risk. But I loved it just instantly. And because the pay, it was different to the city, I was quite good at the beginning when I went into that sector and I negotiated and I said, look, we'll agree on X as a base and then I'll take 20% of everything that I make for you on top of that. And I'm very competitive and I've always been able to make money. It's something that I'm just naturally very good at. I know how to grow a company. And so I just went like that. I just did so well there. Bought my first house at 24 in London, which is huge. I was incredibly proud. And then after being there for 2.5 years, left to start The Source.
Interesting. Quite interesting. Because my brother went to LSE and what he was telling me is that they have a very narrow definition of success. So they tell you that you got to go into finance or consulting, or if you're a lawyer, you go into law. But those are the 3 career paths. And they don't teach us that success can be defined in our own terms. And I think the only way to do that is by testing. And I think from your experience, that's precisely what you did. You tested something else and immediately clicked with you. How did you know this was the thing for you? Because I have a lot of friends that they're going through career changes right now. And they are happy to test, which is, I think, a great first step. I'm going to test and see what I like or what I don't like. How did you know that you liked it? Because sometimes you enjoy what you do, but how do you know that it's actually something that you really, really like, that gives you purpose?
For me, it came from the fact that I am so ridiculously competitive to a fault. And when I went into, because I'd done a total career 180, and I went into this new sector, digital media, and because it was largely a commission-based role, I knew that if I wasn't growing this business, if I wasn't doing really well straight away, I'm not going to be making the money that I need, you know? And I thrive in situations like that. I just knew, every day I had to wake up and make money, and I just really got off on that.
And finance wasn't giving you that?
Finance wasn't giving me that because there was no room in finance in the city to be competitive. It was wealth management, private wealth management for high net worth clients. And I was just sitting there at a desk from 9 to 6 every day, looking at sort of portfolio valuations. And I was so bored. I was just so bored. What I was doing wasn't particularly difficult, but there was nothing in that made me excited. And And it would have been, because it's such a regulated system, it would have been years until I got to a point where I was going out and pitching to, you know, for new business. And I just wasn't happy.
What is it that you enjoyed about the media industry?
I just loved every aspect of it. I loved journalism, obviously wanted to originally be a war reporter. I love the power of being able to communicate with an audience. I like being clever with it. Digital media, it's all, you've got to be quite clever on top of things like SEO and now AI. And I liked every aspect of it. I just instantly thought, this is where I want to be. Because I think ultimately, you've got to do the thing that makes you happy. And when you're happy, you know it.
How do you define happiness?
God, that's hard. How do I define happiness? I think when it comes to work, happiness is waking up and not feeling like you are doing a job because you enjoy it so much that you'd want to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. I think that is happiness with work. I think happiness personally is, I don't know, it's tricky, isn't it?
I usually save these questions midway through or towards the end, so we're a bit warmer in the conversation. So don't worry if you have an immediate answer.
It's hard.
Let me give you my answer of happiness. Okay. I think happiness is dynamic on one hand, and then on the other hand, it should be personal.
Yeah.
Let's just start with the second one, which might be easier to relate to. Personal. So for me, happiness as Alberto should be different than for you, Phoebe. Right?
Yeah, of course.
And I think anyone can understand that to an extent.
Yeah.
But then also it needs to be dynamic. So, for instance, right now I'm 29 years old. So my definition of happiness, or let's say the ingredients that define my happiness at 29, are going to be very different than at 39.
Yeah.
So perhaps right now my definition of happiness, or these ingredients, are having a stable relationship, being close to my family as much as possible, growing my business, have a good relationship with my partner and twin brother, which is a relationship that I really cherish.
Yeah.
But then maybe perhaps 10 years down the line that shifts. I may have kids, so how close I am to my kids. Can I have a stable enough business so I'm actually spending real quality time with my kids? So that's dynamic, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, especially when we are deciding what to study and what are the first jobs that we want to do, we end up making educational choices on what we're going to study, or career choices based on either what media or society tells us, or what our parents tell us.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, then we enter a rhythm in which is very hard to come out from. Then maybe one day we wake up at the age of 40, 45, and we're like, is this really what I wanted to do with my life? And it isn't. And we didn't try anything else. And maybe you're in a situation in which your career is advanced enough for you to be able to pivot into something else. I still believe, and I'm a strong believer, that you can change your life at any point throughout your journey. But it would be naive to say that it is inheriting. It is slightly harder when you're at an advanced stage, because you need to factor failing, right? And if you want, for example, to become an entrepreneur, or even just work at a different industry, completely different than yours, and still work for a company, failure is there. It's an option, right? If I'm failing in my 20s, or let's say my early 30s, I'm failing cheap, because let's say I most likely won't have a family that depend on me. But if I'm on my 40s or 50s, if I'm failing expensive, because I can't, my risk appetite by definition is going to be lower.
Of course.
Because I have a family that I need to support. So that's why I'm always a big supporter to test as much as you can in both your personal and professional life.
Whilst you can.
As early as possible.
As early as possible, exactly.
Because then you can approach exactly the same question. What is your definition of happiness? With more accuracy. Which I think should be the goal for everyone. I don't think the goal is to have the nice house, or the goal is to have the beautiful wife, or the handsome husband, or 3 kids and 2 dogs, whatever it is. Usually those are Hollywood definitions of happiness, but it is to find yours. And the only way, in my opinion, to find it is by testing.
No, I completely agree. It's the most important thing is just to be happy. Mm-hmm. And it took me a really long time to realize that. And it took me a really long time to realize that actually you've got to work to be happy. You've got to wake up and try and actively be happy every day. And I truly am in a space in my life now where I am the happiest I've probably ever been. And I'm significantly happier now when I'm still in, you know, essentially the early stages of building a business. I'm paying all of these people at the end of every month. Sometimes I'm not paying myself. I'm financially nowhere near as secure as I was when I was 25 and on 6 figures and owning a house. But I am so much happier now than I was then. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is when I wake up in the morning and I'm just very conscious of the fact that I don't feel panicked about things. I obviously feel stressed about work things. But I wake up and I genuinely know that I am happy. But that takes work. Like, you've got to work to be happy. It's not always easy, I think.
I'm very curious to identify and then analyze the different factors or stimuli that affect or shape your perception of life as an entrepreneur, or let's say even before you become an entrepreneur, to then become an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So usually some factors or some things that happen throughout your youth shape your mindset in a way that at some point you become an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. And this has been the case for every entrepreneur that has sat down in that chair. So just to summarize your journey, which I think it's quite interesting. So you go to LSE. In LSE, they tell you that this is the career path you need to follow. You end up in finance, like probably 99.9% of the LSE graduates. And then in finance, you quickly realize that you don't like it. And I can probably also safely assume that a lot of graduates feel that right now.
Yeah.
Then the difference is that you've had a person that knocked on your door 4 different times. It's interesting to see that it took you 4 times, which still I think is a great number. It could have taken you 15 times and maybe not even see it, to say, okay, I'm actually going
I'll take the risk.
To take the risk.
Yeah.
So I think just like probably sometimes the opportunities are there. We just can't see them because we're too afraid to take them or to actually open our eyes and see them. But in this case, the opportunity was there. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are in a job that they don't like, that they also have opportunities, but they just are not courageous enough to be able to see them and then grasp them. Yeah. So that's interesting, and I can understand why then you had a passion for media and then how maybe you developed a media company. But there is a piece within your journey that really caught my attention. So you competed for the contest, the Miss England, right? Competition contest. Yeah,
I did.
And I'm quite curious about this because you have a very well-educated and strong academic background. You had some corporate experience. Now, I mean, you wanted to become an entrepreneur. So you've had a lot of intellectual validation, right?
Yes.
Why was a beauty contest important to you?
Because it wasn't important to me.
Okay.
It wasn't important to me. It was because I've always been quite good at playing the system. I'm quite pragmatic and I'm quite realistic about things. And I was at LSE and I knew at that point I was likely to go into finance, right? And I knew, I mean, we don't need to beat around the bush. It's a very misogynistic industry, finance. It really is. It's very male dominated. And I think to pretend that it isn't is just naive. So I knew that I was going to be going into finance, and I knew that it was, even as an LSE grad, you know, with a straight A-star track record, it was still going to be really competitive getting these jobs. And I knew the thing that would make that CV stick out at the top of the pile to whichever men were reading it was, oh, she's pretty, which is really bad. And it's a very anti-feminist thing to say. But I knew that that would get me to the top of the list. Yeah. And so I played the system, which is probably quite an awful thing to say because it's not what you should say.
It's an honest thing to say.
It's an honest thing to say. It's an honest thing to say. But I've always been incredibly pragmatic. I've always been incredibly realistic about things. And
do you regret doing it, even though you had an intention, a logical intention?
No, but I don't regret many things. I don't have a lot of regrets. I think you do what you have to do in the moment to succeed. And I don't think there's a huge amount of point going about life thinking, oh, I wish I would have done things differently. You do what you do at the time for whatever reason you make that decision. No, I don't regret it. I mean, I don't go around telling everyone about it straight away, but I don't regret doing it.
You said that winning is important to you.
Yeah, incredibly.
Winning over others is important to you.
Yeah.
So how do you benchmark it over others? Why is it important to you to measure yourself against someone else?
So I know where it comes from, but it's...
From where?
Okay, so growing up for me was quite difficult as a child. I had to manage risk from a very young age. I have a close relationship with both of my parents now, but growing up it was difficult. I was a social services kid.
Yeah.
So I was on my own from very young, pretty much, and had to look after myself from a very young age. And
what is very young?
13.
13.
Yeah. And I think at the time, you think, I'm strong and I'm capable and I've got this and I'll be absolutely fine on my own. But you don't realise that you're actually still just a child.
What happened at the age of 13?
Social services got involved when I was 13. And so at that point, I basically checked out of the family home.
Mm-hmm.
And I just stayed with whoever I could stay with and basically just did that and got in a series of pretty nasty scenarios.
Did you have siblings?
Yeah, 2 younger sisters.
Did they follow you?
No, they
You
both
were
stayed
separated.
home.
They stayed home.
Yeah, and they were fine. It was okay for them. It was just slightly different for me.
It was different for you. Can I ask why?
No. It was okay. It wasn't like the world's worst thing that could possibly happen, but it just wasn't a nice way to grow up.
And what did you learn from this?
Well, this is where it all comes from for me, because those years, 13 to 18, went to LSE when I was 18, those years 13 to 18 were really hard. Really hard.
Yeah.
And not nice and not pretty.
Yeah.
But it taught me, because I had to learn how.
Yeah.
I just had to look after myself. And I had to survive regardless of what the situation was. Yeah. And it gave me this huge drive. That's where it comes from. Because I know that I am capable of getting through something, and I know that I am capable of winning, and I know that I'm capable of surviving. And I think the worst thing that you can do in life is look back at anything and feel like a victim. There's no point doing that. I use the fact that my childhood was difficult to push me forwards. And so I get all of my drive and all of my competitive energy from it. And it's because of the fact that I have this huge chip on my shoulder, and I refuse to ever be back in that situation. I refuse to ever be as unhappy as I was in those years. And so that's, now I just have to win. I have to succeed because I can't go back there. That's what it is for me.
Thank you, and I really appreciate your honesty. And since you opened up about something delicate from your life, I'm going to do the same. Okay? So we level the playing field. I've had a very complex relationship with my father that I believe it also shaped the entrepreneur that I became, and I would say more than the entrepreneur, the hardworking, resilient, incredibly resilient person that both my twin brother and I became. Without going into details and specifics, at the age of 18, we just stopped having a relationship with him. And that meant also having no financial relationship with him. So we see ourselves in a situation in which we do have big dreams, hopes, but no vehicle to get us there, right? So we need to build the vehicle ourselves. And in that moment, Phoebe, you grow the, pardon my French, but the fuck up in a matter of seconds, what it may take you years to grow up, because there's no plan B, there's just plan A, and you got to figure out that plan A. And probably that was one of the hardest moments in my life, and one of the most important moments that I would not change.
Exactly.
I would not change whatsoever.
Exactly this.
So I can relate to what you're saying. I can understand you now better as an entrepreneur, and I thank you for sharing this with us. Now, take a deep breath, and we're going to go back to the Sauce magazine. Okay? Something a little bit more logical, less emotional. So, let's talk about, exactly, your magazine, The Sauce. How would you describe its content and editorial voice? So, you've already mentioned, to an extent, the mission, especially when you launched it during COVID, but deep dive into what type of exact content are you portraying there?
So we try and do things a little bit differently. there's a lot of press, lots of really incredible titles that focus on the hospitality industry. You know, you've got The Standard, who do what they do wonderfully. Do you not agree with that?
No, I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything.
But anyway, you've got all of these titles and they're all doing something fab. And I think if you want to do well, if you want to be successful, if you want to build an identity, you've got to stand out slightly. And so we've always been quite offbeat. We've always been a little bit quirky. We use a lot of dry humour. We're very witty. I have absolutely no wit, so I don't do the writing. I'm not a funny person. But we're lucky enough to have a team that are really quite humorous. And I think that's
How big is the team?
Team of 12 now, all in. So we have, sort of the core PAYE in-house full-timers, and then a network of columnists, contributors, freelancers, influencers, and then back office, so HR, accountants, etc. 12, 13, about that. But yeah, it's growing.
What made you think that this was something that could work? Because there are a lot of magazines, right? As you've mentioned, right? GQ, How to Spend It, so many different lifestyle magazines that they're just bigger and they have deeper pockets and they already have a readership, a user base. And they are not only in print, but in digital, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
So what made you think, you know what, the world needs another magazine and I'm actually going to succeed because this is how I'm going to differentiate myself?
Yeah. Well, I already knew that if I chose to take the risk, I would succeed. Because for me, I don't see failure as a real viable option. It's going to work because I'm going to make it work. So that was one thing. But that to one side, it was also the fact that I just spent 2.5 years really successfully growing essentially a competitor, another digital magazine, and growing it to the point where, I was taking home a huge amount of cash and I bought my house. So I knew that it was doable. I knew that I could do it because I'd just done it.
How old were you when you started The Sauce?
When I started The Sauce, so 3 years ago, so I would have been 26.
26.
Yeah. So I knew that I could do it because I'd already done it.
That's so interesting because exactly the model or the storyline that you're describing is what happened to so many other young entrepreneurs.
How do you mean?
So they were inspired by a sort of startup-y experience in a similar field.
Yeah.
So that enables them to see that things are possible. And then the second thing that enables them to believe that things are possible are being young. When you're young, you're naive. And being naive can be incredibly powerful. So the combination of both makes you start a business.
Yeah, absolutely this. And I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier, where you can take more risk if you're younger. If you're married and you've got, children and school fees and mortgages and car payments, your appetite for risk is significantly lower because you have all of these obligations, financial obligations, and you need the security. It's really scary starting something new because you absolutely can fail. And the stats are out there, it's like 99% of businesses do fail. Like most of them do not succeed. Everything is stacked against you. It's a huge risk. And, if you're going to put a bet on that risk, like the chances are you're going to lose your money. Like it's not a sensible decision. It takes a huge amount of guts and a lot of bravery.
We've covered your relationship with winning. What is your relationship with failure?
Oh, it's something that I'm working on because it's not a very good one. I don't have a very good relationship with failure. I would love to look at you and say that I completely accept that failure is part of life and I will grow from my mistakes, etc., etc.
Yeah, you logically understand failure, but emotionally you don't accept it.
Precisely this. I logically understand it, emotionally I don't accept it.
So what happens if The Sauce magazine, for some reason, has to shut down? What would you do next? Describe me how you would react the morning after. You wake up in the morning and what do you do?
Honestly, it's just my work. It's like I can't compute it. It would just be... I think I would find it really, really hard to pick myself up from that. I think I would be really broken by that. I think I'd probably, if it had to close tomorrow, I'd probably try and reframe the fact that it had closed. I'd probably, in order for me to get through that, I'd have to reframe it. So I'd say, well, look, we were doing all of this so brilliantly. This was that one thing that came in and killed us.
You would reframe that to yourself or publicly?
Both, I think, because I wouldn't...
Why does the public opinion matter to you?
I don't think that I would do very well with people thinking that I hadn't succeeded in something, because my whole life has been about being really publicly successful at a very young age, and earning lots of money very young and buying my house before any of my friends
people
afford a
expect
house.
that from you.
And people expect that from me.
I understand that.
And I've got to keep that trajectory.
Why do you have to keep it? I understand people's expectations.
Yeah.
But why do you keep feeding into those expectations?
I don't know. It's probably not very healthy.
I don't think it is.
No,
Phoebe.
no, it's not.
I also think that it's not easy to let go from those habits.
Yes, this is precisely it.
Yeah.
And it goes back to what we were saying about happiness. You've got to really work to be happy every day. And this is something that I know I need to work on. I've got to work to be less driven by what other people think of me. I've got to work to be less driven by this fear of failure and accepting the fact that failure is a part of life, and at some point it probably will happen in some way or another.
Yeah.
And when that happens, if I'm not equipped to deal with that well, then I'm going to be in real trouble. So
Yeah.
I've got to work on this.
I don't think that this is precisely something that only happens to you. So on the case of failure itself, nobody teaches us how to fail. So when we go to school, could be university, could be high school. Let's take the example of high school. When you fail, no, let's actually take the example of university. When you fail an exam, and I cannot imagine a teacher going to you and say, Phoebe, I know you failed this exam, but because you failed, I know you're going to learn so much that I know the next exam you're just going to smash it.
Yeah.
No, they're just going to tell you what happened.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
do you know, Phoebe, what are the consequences of you failing? Probably in LSE they would tell you you're not going to make it into finance. But, you know, the impact is, or they shape your relationship with failure in a way that makes you more risk adverse. And then on the other hand, at a personal level, I can relate with trying to fill in some shoes, right? So you were hardworking enough, but also you were lucky enough to be able to enjoy a level of success at an unusual age.
Yeah.
So usually if you're a singer or a football player or even an actor, when you're young is when you succeed. Maybe not so much in acting, but definitely singers and athletes.
Yeah.
And it's normal to be a successful young person. But when you are an entrepreneur, it's usually the opposite.
Yes,
so
yeah.
you peak in your 40s, in your
Yeah.
50s, if you peak. But when you are that little anomaly within your circle of friends and family, and I can totally relate to that, let's be honest, it feels great. And it's a feeling that you don't want to let go. But at the same time, one of the things that I came to learn is that it's not healthy wanting to get that feeling constantly. And I don't think it's necessarily something that comes from insecurity. I don't think it's purely related to external validation, because I feel like someone that has accomplished so much at such a young age, it's quite a strong, confident person, but it's more related to trying to feed back on that feeling. I want to feel again that. I want to feel it, and I want to keep feeling it. It's like being addicted to something, right?
Yes.
So perhaps there's some dopamine involved, even oxytocin maybe to an extent.
Yeah.
But I think being able to understand that and know that for sure it feels great.
Yeah.
But can you keep that up? You can't keep it up for the rest of your life. So you need to protect yourself.
Yeah, but this is precisely it. So you use the analogy of addiction, right? And it's like, let's say you start taking drugs and you have this incredible first high, but then every time after that, you're just chasing that high again, and it's never quite enough. It's never as good as it was, which I think is why it's always about, that's where that drive comes from, because yeah, I've just achieved this amazing thing and it's great and I feel so, so good and everyone's really proud of me. But now I have to do something bigger.
Yeah.
And now I have to do something bigger and then bigger after that. So I do think it's just about trying to navigate that trajectory in a way that's as healthy as possible.
Also because in your particular case, the media industry is transforming very rapidly. So print died. Then the digital world was born.
Yeah.
Then I was reading recently that maybe print will revive again.
Yeah.
Because the new generations, they don't want to be reading, like they have this nostalgia with paper.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe it's not true. Have you considered a print version of the Sauce magazine?
Considered it, wouldn't do it.
No.
I would love to have a print version, but print is at
Financially,
the moment,
it's just not viable.
financially it's not. Yeah, it's not a good industry now, which is a shame.
I agree. There's something beautiful about a physical object, right?
Yeah.
Being able to something tangible.
Yeah, I love reading the paper, but no, it would lose me money, not make me money, so no.
So a lot of startups, cross-sector, could be in your sector, the media sector, could be in the hospitality sector, which is mine, or even in the tech environment. They go through various different changes from day 1 to day 1,000. How did the Sauce magazine evolve from idea to what it is today?
So we are always developing. We have not found the perfect state of being yet. And I don't think we ever will. You're forced to adapt. You're forced to make changes, sometimes as often as on a monthly basis. But because that's a process, you learn on the way what's working and what isn't. And it's completely fine to try something and it not work out.
Yeah.
That's fine because that's how you learn and that's how you grow the company. But we're still developing. When we started out, we weren't as strong at some things as we are now. One of the big things in digital media is keeping your traffic as high as possible. And in order to do that, you need to be publishing quite a lot of content. Because the more articles you're putting out into the world, the more readers they're bringing you in. And at the beginning, we were we took a very sort of laissez-faire, relaxed approach to this. We were like, okay, we'll put something new out this week and something out next week. And now we're a lot more militant about keeping on top of the amount of content that we produce, but simultaneously making sure it still stays very strong.
But what's more important, quality or quantity?
Quality is more important. Quality is more important. We don't produce anywhere near as much as some other titles. We produce enough to keep that traffic high, but without it, having a negative impact on the quality of what we put out. We would rather...
That's in PR. Do you think it's the same in social media?
Possibly, but I think it's hard, social media. It's a very different industry to what we're doing. But I think when you look at sort of creator profiles and influencer profiles, it is just how much can I post every single day. So I think it's a different situation. But no, for us, it's quality over quantity, but keep the quantity high enough to keep the readers engaged.
Interesting. I've interviewed some of the greatest social media experts in this country. And they said that obviously the algorithms, they're very dynamic. They change constantly.
Yeah.
But
it's chaos.
But they say that today, the platform that gives you the most traction is TikTok, followed by Instagram, and that quantity in social media today is more important than quality.
Yeah, it's just about how much can I put out there every single day. But I think it's different because they're trying to achieve...
No, the frequency of how much time they want us engaged with in social media is different to how much time can I be engaged with in magazine.
Precisely.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
Right. So are you familiar with the US president tradition of being 100 days in office? So
yes,
they usually get very criticized or analyzed or judged during their first 100 days in office. I think that entrepreneurs learn so much and go through so much change and go through so many problems in the first 100 days building a company. And I think there should be a dedicated book or even a dedicated podcast about, maybe I'm giving an idea to somebody else, so give me the credit. Okay, I'll send you an invoice for this. But there needs to be a deep dive into those 100 first days in building your company. How were your first 100 days?
Oh my goodness. It was just, looking back now, it feels like such a long time ago, but it really wasn't that long. It was 3 years. It was just chaos.
It's interesting that it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
Because you do so much.
Yeah, because so much has happened.
Yes.
Exactly. It feels like 20 years ago, but it's not that long ago. But the first 100 days were just chaos. Oh my God, we just made so many mistakes.
So the title is Chaos for those 100 days. Okay.
Yeah, we made so many mistakes. We got so many things wrong. But it's just because you're trying to. I'd never set up a company before. I'd never owned a business before. And it's everything from like the legal side, like the whole company's house side of it, to things like SEIS, if you're onboarding early stage investment, just trying to navigate that for the first time and understand it. And then hiring.
For those that don't know, those are UK schemes to be able to onboard an investor with tax benefits.
Yeah. Precisely. Yeah. But they're very complicated. In the beginning, they're very complicated. Now I can do them with my eyes closed, but they are very complicated in the beginning. So that was all chaos. And then it was realizing that, like, oh, crap, like we've just put all of our eggs in this one basket. We have this thing. We've got to make it work. It's sink or swim. And I have a co-founder. He's older than I am, but he's a lot further along in his life than I am. So he's married with children.
Yeah.
And it's what we were saying about risk. His risk appetite is lower. We had to make this work, this thing at the beginning. But it was nuts. Like, we just got so many things
How did you finance those early days?
I sold my house.
Wow.
I sold my house.
That's how much you believed in it.
That's how much I believed in it.
How much did you invest yourself?
I'm not going to tell you that, but...
But was it enough for you to be a little bit uncomfortable?
Yeah.
It was a big risk.
100%. It was a big risk. I'd gone from making well into 6 figures. I was making a lot of money. I bought this house very young. Financially, before I started The Source, I was doing well. I was very comfortable. And I gave it all up and cashed it all in and took the biggest bet on myself.
You don't regret it?
Don't regret it. But I don't regret anything. But I had to completely start over from scratch. And it's terrifying because you're like, that house was my security.
Yeah.
My equity in that property was my security. I have nothing now. I have nothing. And I've given it all up and put it into this company. And if this company doesn't work, I'm screwed. Like, there's no plan B.
Did you design a plan B if the company...
No. There was never going to be a plan B. There was only ever plan A. I was going to make it work. Whether I, didn't sleep for 3 months at a time, I was going to make it work. It couldn't fail.
And how is the company performing now? So first of all, how does it generate revenue? What are the different revenue streams?
Yeah. So our revenue comes through advertising. And our clients tend to be venues within the hospitality sector, bars, restaurants, hotels, or brands within the F&B space, so champagne brands, wine brands, etc. But we work with them in a very different way to other platforms. The margins in hospitality are so narrow at the moment. There is no money there. It is not ethically correct to go to a restaurant that's struggling to break even and say, give me £10,000 and I'll write one article for you, and it might do really well for 2 weeks and it might get you a few bookings.
Yeah.
Because you can't ask them for that amount of cash. Like, you just can't. So the way that we operate with hospitality is very different to other platforms. We don't take that approach. When we partner with anyone, with any restaurant, we do so over the longer term. They will pay us a very low, reasonable, flat fee. And then for that flat fee, we organically cover them over the course of the next 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. So every piece of news that they have, whether that's a new menu launch or they've opened an outside terrace or they're hosting a party and they want people there, whatever piece of news they have, we will just include it organically in our content. So it looks really engaging and they're getting, this huge amount of value for the money that they're paying.
Yeah.
You've got to be really careful. You just can't go and take advantage of hospitality at the moment. And there are other platforms out there that do that, and that's how they generate their money. And to me, that is wrong.
Do you think this model is sustainable? Because the trend in media advertising, so the spend is reducing, is coming down. I think in 2024 it was it fell by 7.2% in the UK. So do you think there's a trend here that you need to be careful about?
No, I think you need to be aware of it. I don't think you need to feel threatened by it. It's like anything, it's a process of adaptation. It's like, how do you adapt to a changing landscape?
Exactly. So do you think you might need to come up with different innovative ideas on how to generate revenue?
100%.
For creating content?
Yeah, 100%. And that's what we do. So we've expanded the offering slightly. We went from purely just working with venues to working with brands. Now we're moving into the lifestyle space. We've just launched Club Source, which is an influencer marketing platform. And that has, a 6-figure ARR off the bat the second it goes live. So that's going to be revenue generating for us. We can take the profits from there, pump them back into the source if we need to. But absolutely, it's a
interesting.
process.
So you thought about this, okay?
Yeah. It's a process of adaptation. You've got to adapt to survive.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid of the landscape. Be aware of it and think about how you can best navigate it.
What are the revenues, ballpark figure of the company?
I'm not telling you.
Most people tell us in the show.
Well, okay.
It doesn't need to be a precise figure.
They're both 7-figure businesses. So if
Okay.
I was to sell both of them tomorrow, I get 7 figures for each one.
Are they profitable?
The source is now profitable. Yep. Club Source is obviously in development, but the wait list is there to bring in 600,000 a year as the second it goes live.
Yep.
And obviously a tech valuation, you typically times that by 10, that's a £6 million business off the
Probably
bat.
more.
Yeah, probably more. They're profitable. But that's
And
a
if
very...
it's purely tech, and there's no operating cost direct to consumer attached to it,
Exactly.
you get a much higher valuation, and you don't need to be profitable. But
Yeah.
that's a conversation for another day.
Exactly. But the source is... So Club Source is the money machine that makes the cash because it's tech-based. The overheads are minimal, really minimal. And because it's recurring subscription revenue, it really doesn't, you don't have to go out and hustle for every bit of money. Club Source just brings in cash. Like it just makes money easily. Whereas the source, the overheads are significantly higher because I'm hiring an editorial team.
Yeah.
I'm hiring designers. I'm hiring salespeople. And I'm paying all of these people who are very good at what they do. And as a result of that, not the cheapest, I'm paying all of these people at the end of every month. It's huge outgoings. And on top of that, you've got to go out and really hustle for every sale that you get.
Yeah.
It's a much more difficult business model, the source, than Club Source. So Club Source, A, it was a money-making opportunity and I like to make money, but B, I realized that we needed some kind of safety net here just in case. And that's how Club Source came about.
Yeah, makes absolute sense. So in a similar way, our business, so our parent company generates over 8 figures in revenue.
Yeah.
And we have 7-figure EBITDA for many years now. And we're working probably with one of the biggest private equities right now in the world, which we're very grateful to work with them. But our strategy to be able to arrive to a stable financial position was to de-risk our growth and our revenue streams. I'm not going to bore our audience with how it works in hospitality, but you can actually make substantial amount of, let's call it liquidity in hospitality, because other businesses, you get a good valuation on paper, but it's not liquid. In hospitality, you can get a decent valuation, but it can be incredibly liquid.
Ooh,
and for instance, my favorite restaurant in our group, which is probably the most fine dining, but ultimately the food is just, I wouldn't say better, but surely the produce is better, but that's why it's more expensive. It's probably one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful restaurant in London, in my opinion. It is not, is the one that generates the least amount of money, not from a top line perspective, but from a bottom line point of view. But we call this the Octopus strategy. So the head of the Octopus would be an incredibly fancy or beautiful business that adds value, not from a quantitative perspective, so not in your bank account, but from a qualitative point of view. And then this octopus has multiple different tentacles, and those tentacles, they need to be generating money to feed back into the head of the octopus. And that works, and that's something that I've seen, that strategy in multiple industries. So it's good to see that you're doing something very similar.
Yeah. I like that, the octopus strategy. That makes a lot of sense. So the source is the head of the octopus. Club source is one of the tentacles. Yeah. And then there will be natural...
I came up with a different analogy, the spider analogy, but people don't like spiders exactly. So I stick to octopus. It's more democratic. People like it.
But no, that's exactly true. So the source is the head of the octopus. Club source is one of the tentacles. And then there's natural progression from both of those businesses. So I think the next step for us would be launching some sort of 360 agency, because you've got the content side on the magazine, you've got the social side with the influencer business. You launch something that combines both of those.
One shop for everything.
One-stop shop, exactly. So there will just be natural...
progressions.
Natural progressions, exactly, which is exciting.
Okay, so this question is for all the London listeners. So your magazine shares some of the best London's restaurants, bars. So I'm going to ask you your favorite brands. So which one is your favorite or best date spot?
Oh my goodness. So you don't understand how often I get asked this question. It's the first thing everyone asks me. It's so hard because it changes all the time. Because London is so exciting. There's always something new opening. And I think it really depends on what you're looking for. But best date spot right now, Marjorie's in Soho.
I'm not sure I would take a first dates to Soho.
I take all my first dates to Soho.
Okay, interesting. I guess we'll never meet there. Okay, best restaurant.
Really tough.
It depends for what, obviously, but for you, your own definition of what is a good restaurant. So which one would be the best
tough.
in London?
But I think currently at the moment, Dorian, Notting Hill. Max Cohen, what he's doing there is incredible. But also the reason that I like it is because we're seeing this real shift at the moment to sort of fine dining without the pretentiousness behind it.
I agree with you.
The food is incredibly strong. There's an open kitchen. You're sitting at the counter. You're getting a bit messy.
I think Notting Hill in London right now is the place to be. And for example, pre-COVID, 2019, 2018, people love to dress up. And the definition of having fun and... let's say luxury was something very pretentious, like your Annabelle's in London and Sexy Fishes. Well, probably not Sexy Fishes, but those kinds of experiences. Yeah. But post-COVID, people just got used to be in their pajamas and stuff. And right now, you're able to go to restaurants that are not in Mayfair. That's why Mayfair has been heavily, drastically, deeply impacted post-COVID and with the interest rates and inflation. But Notting Hill or West London, or even more towards the east, right? But anything that is really very much not Mayfair-based, they became very cool, very trendy, offering the best produce. And you still get the cool crowd that used to dine in these, let's say, eat places in Mayfair, but they are going to these other neighborhood locations dressed in a cooler, more informal way without paying probably... a stupid amount of money. Still paying a decent amount of money, but not the expensive fees that they were paying in Mayfair.
Exactly.
Which is, I think, a great transition too.
It's so true. And it's like now, if you turn around to someone and you say, well, I'm going to Sexy Fish, or I'm going to Annabelle's, or I'm going to, basically anywhere on Berkeley Square.
It sounds you're not cool anymore. Yeah. I agree with you.
But you turn around
sounds
and you say...
very materialistic, remark, but in a way...
It's
speaking
so
in the language of the industry, it
and
is
instead
correct.
You want to be at Rita's, or you want to be at Marjorie's, or you want to be at Dorian, or you want to be at One Club Row. Like, that's where it's all happening now.
Best Sunday brunch?
Oh...
At home.
At home. My philosophy is I'm incredibly busy during the week, Monday to Friday. That's my busy time. Sunday lunch, Sunday brunch, anything on the weekend, it's my house.
Nice. What do you cook at home?
So I love to cook, right? I really enjoy it.
Deliver.
I find it very cathartic. I find it very therapeutic. I enjoy the process and I like to host. But
there was a but coming.
There was a but coming. But I think I've had to come to the conclusion that I'm just not a very good cook. So the first time that so if I'm dating someone, the first thing that I cook for them when they come over is always a risotto. Okay, I always make a risotto because I think it's quite a romantic dish. You can both participate in the process, you know. But I'm head chef; they're always sous chef.
So how do you go from a romantic risotto at home to a Soho night with your date?
What do you have against Soho?
No, nothing. I love Soho, but I would. Yeah, I love Soho.
Soho's Soho's my place. So I've been a member of the Groucho since I was 18. But I was going to say something now, and I just realised I can't say it or they'll take my membership away. But no, I love Soho.
Okay, best bar for a night out. Bar, not club.
If you can get in the Groucho. Because it's naughty and exciting things happen.
Like?
Can't tell you.
You can't say a lot of things. Okay. Let's get into a more personal lens.
Okay.
What's the hardest moment in your journey as an entrepreneur so far?
I think the hardest moment has been navigating hiring mistakes, because when you're a small business, you don't have a huge amount of cash, and when you're hiring someone, you've got to make the right decision. And if you make the wrong decision, it's going to really negatively financially impact you. And I've learned along the way how important that is. And I've made wrong decisions at times with people that we've brought on board to the team. And that's nothing against them as a person. I really firmly believe if you don't love what you do, you're not going to be the right person for that role. So it's very much a two-way street. But it's then navigating that process and letting someone go. I've not had to do that before as a business owner. And that's been tough.
So letting someone go has been tough.
Yeah. I found that difficult. Because I think my philosophy, I have a number of philosophies in life, but one of them is just don't be a dick. And I never want to be unkind or make someone's life difficult. And when you're letting someone go, you're putting them in a really tough situation. You've got to prioritize the business. You've got to do what's best for you and for your company and for the rest of the team. But that means that you are negatively impacting someone else. And that was hard, I think.
That's very interesting, because I think the best decisions need to be logic-driven, particularly if you're building a company. But at the same time, by definition, a founder is emotional to its core. So being able to navigate or find a sweet spot in between both, you know that this is the right thing for the business, but at the same time, most founders, they are emotional.
Yeah.
I think you need to be emotional to be a little bit bullish to do your business and stuff.
Yeah.
And that comes again with a set of challenges, like, for example, this one. How do you let people go? My experience, I mean, right now we have, as I told you earlier, around 300 people employed. Practice makes, I don't know, it just, you know, when you go to the gym and you're working out with dumbbells and things, and then all of a sudden, you know, your skin starts to become rougher and tougher.
Yeah.
And in the very beginning it hurts.
Yeah.
But then it just, at some point it doesn't hurt. I guess you're numb. It's a sad thing to get numb from, right? Getting used to fire people. But it is part of what you signed up for.
Yeah, it's part of the process. And, you know, we've only been going 3 years. It's really not a huge amount of time. And we're going to see this issue probably again and again and again as we continue to grow. And that's it. You do just have to learn to be tough about it. But yeah, it doesn't mean we're all human at the end of the day. And I always try and be kind. It's just hard. It's hard, but it will get easier.
What did you have to sacrifice for you I mean, in the last 3 years for you to build your company?
I mean, the obvious answer is money. To go from really just having more money than I knew what to do with to basically having none. I wasn't paying myself. I was paying all of these people. That was a huge sacrifice because it changes the way that you're able to live your life. You know, I'm not going on holidays or things because I'm putting everything I have into this company. Money's the obvious answer. You go from being really comfortable to starting from absolutely nothing.
I think that's a great answer because a lot of people might get into business, into entrepreneurship for the wrong reasons. They might think, well, because I see this online and this person is living the life. If I become an entrepreneur, I'm going to do the same. And that's why these people will end up quitting very quickly because they're not going to see profits overnight because it's just almost impossible.
Yeah, exactly.
Quite unusual. And if it happens, I don't think it's related to you being an incredible entrepreneur. I think it's mostly because you're lucky.
Yeah.
You know, building a company takes time. And I was having exactly this discussion yesterday with another guest that came to the show, and she was saying that precisely what you were mentioning. For many months, she didn't take a salary, and sometimes she still doesn't. And those are sacrifices that before you start a business, you need to know that they will happen. And if you're a person that cannot be stable in unstable situations and even feel comfortable in uncomfortable situations, you're going to be making the wrong choices because you're going to become incredibly emotional and you're going to be making the wrong choices in your business or in a professional context, but also you're going to come home and make the wrong choices in your personal life.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think entrepreneurship is for everyone. And I think conversations like this one, you're being, and I really appreciate it, Phoebe, you're being incredibly open and honest. So you started with a beautiful smile saying, I love what I do and I don't regret anything. But at the same time, hey, look at this, and that. These are the things that I needed to let go. And this is precisely what we want to do with the show. So this is the journey, raw, unfiltered. Now, whoever is listening to this, if you want to become an entrepreneur, this is what it is. Yes, at some point, maybe you can make money, but it's a big maybe. The biggest factors that contribute towards your happiness are freedom and being able to build something. So if that's something that triggers you, 100%. But I think it's important that people are real and honest with themselves and not get into entrepreneurship because in this day and age is the thing that they tell us that is going to make us feel enough and purposeful and better, because it's not the case for everyone. No. That not everyone would get off or would have that same feeling from entrepreneurship. Yeah,
it's incredibly hard. And I think you are either the right person for it or you are not the right person for it. I think do not go into it thinking you're going to become a millionaire overnight. Yeah, you might get super lucky, but 99 times out of 100, that's not going to happen. And you will sacrifice so much trying to make it happen. And your confidence will be knocked. And probably because you're so stressed, your health will be knocked as well. And it's this huge gamble. And I think, you know, dream big, but equally be really aware of the risks because there are a lot of risks.
Yeah. On the days where everything goes absolutely wrong and your brain keeps telling you, quit.
Yeah.
What motivates you to keep going? What do you tell yourself?
Oh, gosh. I've had those days and you just think that, you know, you're not going to be able to survive this and it's all going wrong. I got to the point quite recently when I was trying to raise for Club Source where I had literally 6 weeks of runway. That's all I had. And I just knew unless I raised within this amount of time, like that whole business would just go under, like it wouldn't work. And I just remember being so deeply, incredibly panicked by everything and so overwhelmed. But I think you've got to try and get through it. And for me, the one thing that I told myself is, as long as I can make this happen, as long as I can raise this cash, then I've immediately got a really successful business. And it's just thinking to yourself, like, you just need to do this one thing and then you can make it through. Like, you just have to get over this next hurdle and then it's going to be okay. Like, you just have to keep pushing yourself. It's really easy. It's an awful lot easier to give up. It's significantly harder to keep going when things are hard. And it requires so much just willpower. There are so many times where I just thought, it'd be so much easier if I sacked all of this in and just went to get another job in the city or something. And it's a lot harder to try and keep pushing forwards, but you've got to try.
Can relate to that.
Yeah.
My trick a company goes through different maturity stages, right? So in their initial years, it's like a love relationship, right? In the initial years, there are a lot of things that can break it, right? Because it's not strong enough.
Yeah.
So I remember in those initial years, also for us, financial planning was incredibly important, and our forecasts they were so tight, and obviously you were depending on so many different factors happening and so many things that you forecasted for them to happen, that if one of those factors doesn't happen, then okay, so what are we doing, right? But they need to happen.
Yeah.
And then as the company grows and becomes more mature and financially stable, you're able to then make more strategic decisions rather than tactical and operational. So you can look at 3 or even 5 years down the line, which is luckily where we are right now. But I still apply the same approach when I have a tough day at work in my business. So in entrepreneurship, but I think it's like with anything in life, you can see a problem composed of multiple problems, right? And when your brain, I think any human brain tries to solve multiple problems at the same time, I think you're just going to freeze.
Yes.
You're going to freeze, and your brain is going to immediately tell you to run away.
Yeah.
Because that's just too hard, and your brain is trying to protect you. Fair enough, right? I mean, that's a survival instinct.
Yeah.
So I think what's important is to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
Right? One thing at a time. And that allows you to, A, be able to formulate an accurate and tailored solution towards that problem.
Yeah.
And then B, execute it with logic, not emotion.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you go into the next problem and the next problem.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people listening to this, they might think, that sounds so tiring. Well, yes, it is. But I don't think there's any other way, because trying to do multiple things at the same time, maybe you can and you're a genius. I personally feel that maybe you will be able to do it once, but because you're going to be in this situation multiple times, I think the best approach is to simplify things. You just got to approach it really
methodically.
Simplify things. For me, it's about simplifying. I was reading an article, and don't quote me exactly on the numbers, but maybe not the majority, but a big number of UK millionaires, so let's say entrepreneurs that became millionaires, so successful entrepreneurs, they are dyslexic. And dyslexic people, by definition, they need to simplify things in order to understand them, so they need to break them down.
Yeah.
And that's what my twin brother and I, we're not dyslexic as far as we know, but I think today you can get diagnosed for a lot of things. But we don't think we're dyslexic, but we do simplify things always. And that allowed us to pull through, believe me, Phoebe, in one of the toughest moments that you can ever imagine. That I personally believe that if I would just share that same situation with anybody else, I would feel like you're at a dead end. You're not going to make it.
Yeah.
But simplifying it, you're just breaking down, and just by breaking down all these problems, you see like small routes, and then there's a path towards sunshine.
But I think this is exactly it. So it's when everything is going wrong at once, you do go into survival mode. And a lot of entrepreneurship is very much fight or flight. And you'll hit these huge hurdles, and your brain will either want to run away, flight, where you give it all in and you stop the business and you go and get a job somewhere else, or you fight. And that means you're going to push through it. And it's about how you push through it, which is what you then need to navigate. But I think you do one or the other. And a successful entrepreneur will always do fight, not flight.
That's so interesting. I'm going to add to that, because I'm reading a very, very interesting book about the different, let's say, parts or components of our brain. And one of the oldest parts of our brain is our limbic system, or amygdala, which registers all kinds of emotions, right?
Okay.
Fear, love, excitement, all of those. The problem is that if you act on those emotions is when you're probably going to develop a solution towards a problem or a situation that is not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
But what this book is saying is that the amygdala was incredibly useful to make us survive and preserve us. So back in the day, you see a tiger and the amygdala is telling you, run away.
Yeah.
Now, according to this book, there are 3 different solutions that your brain is giving you against a problem or a threat. Flight, freeze,
Yes.
or fight.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think the worst one is freeze.
The
right?
worst one is 100%
But I've
freeze.
seen a lot of people that fall under that category.
Yes.
They just don't do anything.
Yeah. Yes.
So I think if you're going to be in that situation, try to fight. I think would always be a good option. But it depends on the magnitude of the problem, right?
Yeah.
So if it's a tiger, you might not win it. If it's a big enough problem for a business, sometimes it's better, to call it a day and do something else, right? But ultimately, it's about, in my opinion, movement. Never, ever freeze.
Yeah. If you're confronted with a problem and you bury your head in the
And
sand
just stick within.
and you refuse to address it, that problem is only going to get worse. It's not going to get any better.
Yeah.
You have got to make a decision. It doesn't really matter what that decision is. Obviously, it's best to try and tackle the problem and move through it, but you can't do nothing.
Yeah.
And so many people do nothing.
Talking about people, including us, we're all flawed, right?
Yeah.
We're human, we're all flawed, and I believe that we live and we learn, right?
Yeah.
So we need to make tons of mistakes to be able to learn. What's the biggest mistake you've made as a founder or co-founder, and what did it teach you?
It's hard because I try not to look at anything as a regret, but I've definitely made mistakes. God, it's hard. The biggest one, because there are so many mistakes. Probably not developing different avenues of the source as quickly as I could have done.
Avenues, you mean revenue streams?
I mean revenue, I mean diversification of content that we're producing. Not moving fast enough with trends or keeping up with how the landscape is changing. Being too, I think ultimately my point is being too...
In love with your business.
Yeah, I was going to say too slow to take action, but in love with the business. Yeah. You've got to move quickly. You can't be scared to move quickly. You're going to get left behind if you don't. And it took me too long probably to realize that. We could be further along than we currently are if I'd realized that sooner.
Jeff Bezos says something very, very similar. So he said a good or great entrepreneur has 2 traits, and they are conflicting traits, but you need to have both. You need to be very stubborn.
Yeah.
You need to be stubborn to keep going. The days where everything goes wrong, you're going to tell yourself, I'm going to see this through, and I'm not going to quit.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to be open-minded, which is the opposite, right? So the market, once you deploy a service or a product, will give you feedback. And if you're too in love with your business, right, you're not going to adopt that feedback, right? New trends, whatever, new competitors entering your industry. And you need to be open-minded enough to be able to shape your business. So finding the sweet spot of being stubborn, but at the same time open-minded is where any entrepreneur wants to be in.
Exactly. And one of my biggest issues is and this isn't a good thing, I'm quite bad at taking on board criticism. I don't handle it very well. And I always say to my team, you've got to listen to constructive criticism because it's good for you. It's how you grow and how you develop. But I'm very hypocritical because I don't like having criticism directed at me. And what that means is if someone's saying to me, Phoebe, you're not doing this as well as you could be, like the source needs to be doing this slightly differently, I'm always a bit like, I don't want to take that on board. So I've got to learn to be more open to that criticism because ultimately I'm just holding myself back by not doing that.
Sometimes it really depends on who is giving you that criticism, not about the criticism itself.
This is very true.
So this brings me to a very important topic, which are co-founder relationships. So the second reason why startups fail is due to co-founder fights.
Yeah.
So what type of relationship do you have with your co-founder? So, because there are a few interesting things that you mentioned. The first one is that he's older than you, and then the second one is that he's in a more advanced stage in life than you, so he has kids.
Yeah.
So that means that he's more risk adverse. How do you deal with this?
So firstly, I am incredibly lucky to have Phil as my co-founder. I get that, because it's such an intense process building a business, that relationship can be really tricky at times. And with us, we've always been incredibly lucky that it's worked very well. And the reason for that is really obvious to us. It's because we are polar opposites. We are completely different. I am very headstrong, ADHD, all in, chaotic. It's going to work because it can't fail. Let's just throw all of our eggs in this one basket and move really quickly. And Phil is incredibly cautious. And let's be very slow and let's think things through. And let's look at, the financial projections behind this. And let's look at the legal implications that this has. And it's very... if it was just Phil on his own, the sauce wouldn't work. If it was just me on my own, the sauce wouldn't work. We have the parts that the other person is missing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So together it's the perfect balance. But I'm so lucky to have him. And we worked together at the last place as well. He was my editor there. So we knew that we had a partnership that we could turn into a successful business already. But he's amazing. I'm incredibly lucky to have him.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
If this chapter of your life had a title, what would it be?
Chaos. It would just be chaos.
Do you like chaos?
I do. I thrive in chaos. It makes me happy.
I love chaos too.
Yeah.
Why do you like chaos?
It's just where my brain gets most excited. I don't like structure and regulated situations. I like to be free to take risks and do crazy things.
Yeah.
I just get off on chaos. It's the way that because my childhood was chaotic.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm used to. That's how my brain learned to survive at a very young age. And so now, chaos. Good chaos, though, is the chapter of that title. It's happy
Good
chaos.
chaos.
Good chaos. Not bad chaos.
I can relate to that. So I become the better version of myself when my life is complex. When things are not incredibly foreseeable. When I have 3-5 different projects that are at early stages, but I still need to keep my business as usual. And that's when I am probably, the best version of myself. I'm sharper and I'm faster.
Yeah, because you're being kept on your toes. That's why, your brain is forced to engage constantly with everything that's going on.
Yeah.
When life is dull and nothing's really happening, that's when we just become quite a boring version of ourselves because there's nothing to excite us.
I think, at least in my case, I agree with you. I become slower and I just don't have the smartest ideas. I have less ideas. But I've seen that some other people, when things are foreseeable, they're the best version of themselves.
Yeah.
And when you start to complicate their life structure to an extent, again, they go back to either freezing or fleeing. And I just don't think there's a box that fits everyone's size.
We're all different.
Yeah. So I think an entrepreneur, by definition, needs to like chaos.
Yeah. I think to be a successful entrepreneur, you've got to be able to thrive in chaos and you've got to get off on it and really like it.
Yeah.
If you like structure and order and things that are foreseeable and everything's making sense, it's not the path for you.
Yeah. Let's talk about Forbes. So you were included in this year's list, Forbes 30 Under 30.
Yeah.
Was this important to you?
Incredibly important to me. Incredibly important to me. It's been a goal of mine for years, since they launched it pretty much. And it happened at the 11th hour because I turned 30 in September. It was either now or never. And it wasn't an option for me to not get it. I had to get it. I think for me, it's like Forbes under 30 for an entrepreneur is probably like a Michelin star for a chef. That's how I see it. And I was like, I had to get it. I had to. It was going to happen.
I can understand you really wanting to get it because you're very competitive, and at the same time you're in the media industry, right? So obviously you know Forbes what it means. So that's like maybe for somebody else liking it, but on steroids, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it contributed in any way the journey of your company? I mean, probably it's too early to say because it just happens, but
Yeah, it's tricky. It's definitely, my life has changed as a result of it. In terms of just the success of the business has really, like, we've had a lot more interest and a lot more engagement off the back of it. Do I think that me wanting to one day receive it affected how I ran the source? Probably not. But we'll definitely capitalize on it now to continue growing.
how would you define success?
It's really hard because if you'd asked me this question 4 years ago, I probably would have said money. Because at the time I was making all of this money and I was like, wow, I'm successful because I'm so young. But now I look back and I realize I wasn't happy then. And I've started over from scratch and I'm significantly happier and I genuinely wake up in the morning and I love my life. Success, I think, the bottom line is just about being able to wake up and say, I'm happy today. If you can do that, then that's success.
Would you say you're successful now?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you for coming, for your honesty. It's been beautiful to chat with you. I think right now we live in a world that celebrates or defines founders in two ways. So you either need to be a tech founder or you need to be on a mission to change the world. But one of the main missions of this show, of our podcast, is to demonstrate that success can have many different shapes, forms, definitions. You didn't reinvent the wheel by building a magazine, but that's exactly why I think your story is incredibly important. You have shown us today that success can have a completely different form, a form that is rooted on a very conservative and old industry, and that is also incredibly risky because it's changing. Yet you found success in it, you found happiness in it, and for that you have honestly my deepest respect, and I very much hope that the sauce and its sister brands within the Octopus strategy might become a huge octopus. Thank you.
Thank you very much.